Julin stood still, the dim amber glow of the seal warming to a pale blue. The sound it made, soft, final, signaled that the treaty was official. He allowed himself a breath. Just one. It was the first since the shuttle had docked on this alien station a week ago. Across from him, the Kithar delegation remained motionless, their feline forms looming like carved obsidian statues. Vorik, the lead ambassador, finally rose. His single working eye, milky and scarred, locked onto Julin with a weight that bypassed words. The agreement is bound, Vorik rasped. Only one ritual remains. Julin inclined his head, expecting perhaps a ceremonial drink or symbolic gesture. Instead, Vorik motioned toward the rear archway. Two massive guards stepped aside. From the shadows, she emerged. Everything changed. She moved like a concept. Like a myth made flesh. Her body was tall and carved in muscle, wrapped in crimson and bone-white stripes that flexed with every step. Her hair was a river of flame, eyes like twin emerald stars. Ears like those of a great cat twitched to the hum of the room's life support. Her gaze locked on him with unnerving stillness. "This is Zera," Vorik declared, voice brimming with triumph. "From the perfection crush of my own bloodline. A gift of honor. A treaty bride." Julin's mouth dried. Every diplomatic protocol he'd ever learned screamed at him. This was barbaric. A violation. The Terran Alliance had outlawed such practices centuries ago. And yet. He glanced at her, at Zera. She wasn't some passive pawn. She radiated energy like a predator holding her breath. Denying her, publicly, was unthinkable. A rejection not just of her, but of the treaty itself. Of peace. Julin gave a shallow nod. It cost more than anyone in that room would ever know. In the quarters assigned to him, an opulent suite designed to impress, Zera stood by the viewport, her skin reflecting nebulae. She hadn't spoken a word since arriving. He had shown her the amenities, given her space. Still, silence. That silence wasn't emptiness. It pressed against him like heat. He walked toward the bar and poured a glass of water. "Would you care for a drink?" She turned. Her movement was slow, almost feline, her expression unreadable, except in her eyes. There was fury there. Confusion. Disdain. "I was a gift, human," she said. Her voice was a low vibration, almost a growl. "Why haven't you touched me yet?" Julin held her gaze, measured. Calm. The night passed without another word. Zera did not sleep. By morning, she sat rigid on the edge of the bed in the adjoining guest room. He had left her there, had bid her pleasant rest, and walked away. Her people had explained the ritual clearly, the bond had to be sealed. Now. Forcefully. Anything less was dishonor. Rejection. She rose, the silk garment she wore feeling like a shackle. She needed movement. She needed combat. She found him in the training room, performing slow, circular movements that defied everything she understood of fighting. He acknowledged her with a nod. "Good morning. I trust you slept well." Her fingers curled into claws. "I do not sleep when my honor is insulted." Insulted? He didn't stop moving. "You find my form unworthy," she snapped. Julin's voice remained even. "On the contrary. I find it remarkable. But I don't take what isn't offered." She stalked into the padded ring. "I was offered by my ambassador. That completes the contract. Do you require proof of value?" "I will not fight you, Zera." "Then you are a coward." "I am a diplomat. Fighting is what I came to end." But he mirrored her stance, loosely, non-threateningly. It wasn't a refusal. It was something stranger, permission. She struck. Lightning fast. Her claws aimed at his throat. He didn't block, he guided. Redirected. His movements were fluid, deliberate. Her own momentum twisted her off balance. She attacked again. A sweep kick. He wasn't there. Her legs landed on empty air, her own motion betraying her. She sprawled to the mat, breathing hard, more from the shock than exhaustion. She stared at him. He hadn't struck her. He hadn't hurt her. But he had won. Completely. He offered her a hand. She slapped it away. And yet. Her breath caught, not from humiliation, but from the intimacy of the encounter. The grace of his control. His body hadn't dominated hers. It had shaped hers. Redirected it. He had touched her. But not the way she expected. Not the way she'd been bred for. The shift unsettled her more than any blow. Later that day, the invitation arrived. Obsidian wafer. Gold script. A diplomatic dinner. Julin accepted, turning to her. "I believe this is a joint invitation," he said, voice gentle. "The station master wishes to honor the treaty. They'll expect you to attend." He gestured to the wardrobe replicator. "Select something comfortable." She knew it was a test. Another one. She chose deep crimson silk, simple, elegant. It clung to her form, bared her shoulders, displayed her stripes with dignity. When she stepped out, Julin, dressed in his dark blue diplomatic uniform, paused. Just for a breath. "You look magnificent," he said softly. At the dinner, the predators wore smiles. Dozens of species, all circling. Politics masquerading as pleasantries. Zara stood at Julin's side, the perfect ornament. But she was watching. Learning. He wasn't weak. He wielded words like weapons, let empathy become armor. He turned veiled threats into compliments. Used self-deprecation to expose arrogance. She was witnessing a new kind of strength. Later, in the quiet of their suite, she stood before him. "You fight without fighting," she murmured. "They fear you. But you never raise your voice." "Fear is a blunt instrument," he replied. "Respect cuts deeper." She closed the distance between them, close enough to feel his warmth. Her claw traced the line of his jaw. "And what is your purpose, Julin?" His gaze dropped to her lips. For a moment, the world held its breath. Then he stepped back. It wasn't rejection. It was restraint. Respect. It felt worse than rejection. Because this time, she had reached. And he had retreated. Zara couldn't sleep. Not because the guest bed was unfamiliar or because the station's artificial gravity was subtly tuned to Terran norms, but because everything inside her was unraveling. Julin's refusal to touch her wasn't just confusing, it was humiliating. And more than that, it was dangerous. Her clan had sent her to seal a peace with her body and blood. To be refused was to bring shame. Dishonor. Rejection from her mate meant rejection from the treaty. From purpose. She rose, silent and barefoot, and made her way through the darkened suite. Julin's study was minimally decorated, almost monastic. Clean surfaces, utilitarian lighting, nothing personal, except one thing. The data slate. Unlocked. She told herself it wasn't spying. It was reconnaissance. Understanding one's opponent was critical. The Kithar crushed weakness by knowing it intimately. She searched past the political memos and cultural briefings until she found the locked directory labeled logs_personal. The encryption was basic. Her claws made quick work of it. A holographic image flared to life. Julin's face filled the space, tired and stripped of his diplomatic mask. Log entry, Day 3. She continues to test me. In the training room today, gods, she's fast. More powerful than I imagined. There's beauty in it.
But holding her at a distance is harder than I thought. The image flickered. Log entry, Day 4. The dinner. She was magnificent. Everyone saw it. And I saw them watching her like a prize. I saw the way she looked at them, with disdain. She doesn't know she's more than a weapon. Doesn't know how to be. And damn it, I'm failing. Because I see her. And I want her. And I can't let myself. Zara froze. He hadn't refused her because he found her lacking. It wasn't contempt. It was restraint. Respect. She didn't know what to do with that. She was still staring at the projection when the chime rang. Someone at the door. At this hour? She moved quickly but silently, keeping to the shadows as Julian answered. She perched near the ceiling ducts, her claws gripping the metal, body perfectly still. The Kithar called it ghost posture. Total silence. It was Vorak. He stepped in like he owned the room. Scanned it. Sniffed the air. Your progress with the treaty bride is lacking, diplomat, he began without preamble. Julian remained calm. My relationship with Zara is a private matter. The treaty stands. Vorak sneered. No, you're mistaken. The treaty was never the objective. Zara tensed. Vorak took a step closer, savoring the moment. You see, we studied your species. Sentimentality. Morality. At first, we dismissed it as weakness. But then we realized, weakness can be weaponized. He gestured lazily toward the guest wing. She is a masterpiece. Genetically tailored. But not just for strength. Julian's voice dropped. What did you do? Vorak smiled. Had you consummated the union, as any proper male would, she would have released a biophage. Coded to your DNA. Within weeks, every human on this station would be sterile. The perfect war. No ships. No blood. Zara felt her heart stop. She doesn't even know, Vorak added. Her mind was sealed. Her instincts triggered by bonding. You've ruined it all with your hesitation. Julian stood frozen. Then. You want to kill her now. Vorak's grin widened. Not kill. Decommission. Quietly. Give her to me, and this can be cleaned up. The treaty survives. You survive. Julian stepped forward. No. You'd throw away your life. Your people's future, for her. Julian's voice dropped to a low growl. Get out. Vorak's good eye narrowed. Then he nodded once and turned. You've sealed your fate, Terran. He vanished into the corridor. Julian stood shaking. Zara dropped silently to the floor behind him. When he turned, he didn't flinch. He simply walked to the viewport, hands shaking, gaze distant. She followed. What did he say? She asked. Julian didn't look at her. Instead, he told her everything. The failsafe. The weaponized genetics. Her body as a ticking bomb. Her knees buckled. She slid down the wall, unable to breathe. She wasn't a bride. Not even a warrior. She was a mechanism. A biological detonator. No, she whispered. It's a trick. But it wasn't. The pattern fit. Every clue. Every command. Even the silence in her own mind. She had been programmed to explode through the act of love. I'm a trap, she breathed, curling in on herself. Julian didn't speak. He just knelt beside her, laid a hand on her shoulder. No command. No judgment. Just presence. The intimacy of it, so quiet, was unbearable. She leaned into his hand. Then. The sharp hiss of a plasma cutter sliced the main door. They shot to their feet. Vorik wasn't waiting anymore. Julian's mind went razor-sharp. His agents, he said. They can't let me live now. They'll have to go through me, Zara growled, eyes blazing. The door blew open. 2 massive Kithar soldiers charged in, bulkier than Zara, armored and armed. She didn't hesitate. She flipped the obsidian treaty table on its side as plasma bolts screamed through the suite. The black stone absorbed the blasts. Julian ducked behind the bar and triggered a panel. A pistol dropped into his hand. Sleek. Terran standard. West corridor, he shouted. It leads to the conduits. Zara didn't answer. She moved. A streak of red and white, she launched at the first attacker, claws tearing into the joints of his armor. Julian fired at the second, targeting the rifle's energy cell. It exploded in sparks. The Kithar roared and drew a blade. Julian ducked out, heading for the corridor. Now. Zara disengaged with a spinning kick, sprinting after him. Plasma fire chased their heels. They vanished into the darkness of the service tunnel. Back to back. Warrior and diplomat. Weapon and voice. No longer bride and groom. Now they were something else entirely. Partners. The service corridors of the Spire station were narrow, cold, and alive with machinery. Cool air whispered from ventilation shafts, cables trembled with energy surges, and the soft red glow of emergency lighting turned every surface into a twisted shadow. Julian led, his mind already building the path. Central Spire, he murmured, breathless but focused. 4 sectors away. Communications hub. If I can reach it, I can override the local network. Broadcast Vorik's confession to the Alliance and the Kithar High Command. Zara nodded, scanning their path. We're being followed. 2 more. Heavy-footed. They're not trained for stealth. They ducked into a tight alcove, the scent of coolant and metal thick in the air. Julian pressed his back to the wall. Zara stood in front of him, shielding him with her body. Her muscles trembled from the earlier fight, but she was a wall of controlled fury. You've never killed before, she murmured. It wasn't a question. No, Julian answered. It's not my purpose. I was created for it, she said quietly. Every day of my life was a preparation for violence. We were taught honor comes from the kill. Our bodies, ourselves, belong to the Dominion. She paused, then added, you speak of choice. I've never had one. Julian leaned slightly forward. You have one now. The footsteps passed. They remained still, close enough to feel each other's heartbeat. Her warmth, her scent, clean, wild, foreign, wrapped around him. The closeness wasn't tension anymore. It was comfort. Shared breath. Shared danger. Zara turned, slowly. Her eyes, vivid and feral, locked onto his. Why, she whispered. Why didn't you take me? It would have been easier. The treaty. The peace. Julian met her gaze, unflinching. Because it would have been wrong. Her breath caught. You are a person, he said. Not a prize. Not a clause in a treaty. Zara's throat bobbed. For the first time, her claws, once always curled, always ready, relaxed. She brought her forehead to his. A gesture of pure trust. Then. Her lips brushed his. Not violent. Not demanding. Exploratory. He responded. His hand cradled her jaw. Her claws rested, feather-light, on his shoulders. Neither dominant. Neither yielding. They simply were. It ended with a breath. No words. Just the unspoken understanding, they were no longer strangers bound by ceremony. They were allies. Equals. Something new. Their quiet moment ended the way such moments always did, violence. They reached the final corridor to the communications hub. It was a straight 50-meter gauntlet. 2 plasma turrets blinked to life at the far end. Repeater class. Set to full auto. There was no way to cross it alive. I'll draw their fire, Zara said grimly. I've taken plasma hits before. I'm faster than most. No, Julian said immediately. We do this smart. Not heroic. He scanned the corridor. Above them, a thick, shielded conduit ran the entire length. Power cables. If I can get up there, I can crawl across. But I'll need a distraction. I am a distraction, she said with a smirk. You don't engage, he insisted, deadly serious. Draw them. Do not fight. You're not expendable. She held his gaze, something warm and fierce behind her eyes. Then, she nodded. He climbed. She boosted him, her hands strong under his boots. He slipped onto the power conduit and began to crawl. Below, Zara stepped into the kill zone. And screamed. A battle cry. Raw, feral. So loud it echoed down the corridor like thunder. The turrets opened fire. Plasma bolts lanced the air. She moved. A blur of stripes, diving behind pillars, vaulting over pipes. Always moving. Always just out of reach. She was a phantom of red and white, her body a blur of impossible grace. Julian crawled, inch by agonizing inch. Sweat poured down his back. He didn't look down. The roar of the turrets masked all sound. Still, he crawled. Finally, he was there. The control room. 2 guards. Standard armor. He dropped. 1 clean shot, helmet joint. The second he elbowed hard in the throat. The guard dropped. He slapped his data slate into the terminal. A cascade of holographic data flooded the room. Then. A voice behind him. I knew you would come, diplomat. Vorak. He stepped from the shadows, a vibroblade in his hand, teeth bared in a snarl. Julian turned too slowly. The blade slashed across his side. Fire. Pain. He collapsed. Vorak stood over him. You should have taken her, he sneered. But then. A scream of rage. Zara slammed into him like a meteor. Her promise not to engage had died the moment she saw Julian fall. The 2 Kithar collided. Steel and claws. Rage and precision. Zara moved like fury incarnate, her strikes rapid and surgical. Vorak was older, but cunning. He feinted. Then lunged not at her, but at Julian. Zara moved on instinct. She threw herself into the blade's path. It pierced her shoulder, a deep, brutal wound. But her other hand struck. Claws found the soft tissue beneath Vorak's chin. His final sound was a wet, gurgling rasp. Julian, bleeding but conscious, crawled to the console. His fingers raced over the interface. He uploaded the files. The confession. The assassination plot. The encoded visual and audio logs. Broadcast initiated. To the fleet. To the Dominion. To everyone. The screen flickered blue. Then silence. They had won. The suite was quiet again. Gone were the scorched walls, the splatter of plasma, the echoes of chaos. Everything had been cleaned, restored. The obsidian floor gleamed, polished as if nothing had happened. But everything had. Julian lay on a medical bed, pale and bandaged. A dermal weaver hummed softly over his side, knitting tissue back together in steady pulses of biolight. Zara sat beside him. Her arm was in a sling, wrapped in antiseptic mesh that shimmered faintly. Her striped skin bore bruises and cuts, but her posture was calm. Watchful. No longer a weapon coiled to strike. Just present. Fully and silently there. The treaty had held, but not as it was. The Kithar High Command had been appalled. The evidence of Vorok's plan was irrefutable, damning. His entire clan had been disgraced, their ancestral claims stripped. The honor they'd built on blood and manipulation had dissolved overnight. Now the peace was being rewritten. Not on old ways, but on new ones. Julin and Zera were not just symbols. They were survivors. Witnesses. Heroes. She looked at him. His face was peaceful in sleep. Soft in a way she had never imagined it could be. A man who had defied her people. Not with blades or threats, but by refusing to break her. She reached out, her uninjured hand tracing the lines on her own arm. Her stripes, once symbols of pride, of weaponhood, felt different now. For so long, she whispered, I believed these marks were my purpose. Her gaze shifted to him. But now I see, they are just mine. He stirred, eyes fluttering open. Julin smiled, slow, warm, the kind of smile that reached beyond language. That's what I've been trying to tell you. She rose and moved to the edge of his bed, sitting beside him with slow, careful movements. The scent of her, familiar now, grounding, wrapped around them both. The silence between them was no longer fragile. It was peaceful. Intimate. She leaned down, her expression unreadable, but soft, not the cold mask of a trained killer. I was a gift, human, she whispered again. But this time, the words didn't strike like a threat or an accusation. They came like an offering. Honest. Bare. Why haven't you touched me yet? Julin reached up, his fingers brushing the white stripe along her jaw. Because, he murmured, pulling her gently closer, I was waiting for you to ask. The kiss that followed was no longer a test or a contradiction. It wasn't political. It wasn't ritual. It was real. A surrender of defenses. A joining not of strategy, but of choice. Their bodies met without force, without roles. Just two souls, equally broken, equally reborn, finding shelter in one another. 3 standard years later, the Spire station was a memory. Now there was Zyros. A gift world. A diplomatic gesture of peace from a neutral system, untouched by war, ripe with life. The Terran-Kithar Alliance had built their new joint facility here, high in the boughs of titanic ancient trees. Balconies overlooked luminous fungal forests below. Smart glass domes glowed with the pulse of growing things. Julin stood on their balcony, a mug of spiced tea in hand, his eyes tracking the phosphorescent waves below. The man who once danced between diplomacy and destruction now looked, at peace. Strong arms wrapped around his waist from behind. A familiar warmth pressed into his back. Zera rested her chin on his shoulder, her breath brushing his neck. You're thinking too loudly, she purred. Just reflecting, he murmured, leaning into her. Do you miss the Spire? He paused. I miss you in the Spire. But not the rest. She chuckled, low and warm. Good answer. She had changed, profoundly. But the core of her was still flame and steel. She still moved like a predator, still trained like a soldier, still bore her claws proudly. But now, there was more. She had discovered humor. Playfulness. Books. Music. She devoured Terran philosophy with a particular fascination for Stoics, and had a baffling obsession with Shakespeare's tragedies. She had become herself. Entirely. For the first time. Their sparring sessions had changed too. No more battles for dominance. Now, they moved in rhythm, a dance of technique and improvisation. They laughed when they fell, tangled and breathless, on the mats. A chime echoed from the house. The delegation, Julian sighed. Try to be nice. I will try, she said. No promises. 2 new diplomats had arrived that morning, one young Terran, Peterson, freshly minted from the academy and wide-eyed, and one Kithar, Rivek, with pale orange stripes and posture too stiff for his years. They arrived flustered. Nervous. Especially under Zara's gaze. Ambassador Julian, an honored Zara, Peterson stammered. We bring initial reports on the mining dispute in the Cygnus sector. Rivek cleared his throat. The territory was claimed by a Talon clan warrior 2 generations ago. By right of conquest, it is ours. Peterson countered quickly. Alliance law states that uninhabited zones fall under the first documented claim. Our prospectors found it first. They went back and forth. Law against strength. Discovery against tradition. Julian watched. Silent. Amused. Finally, Zara spoke. Rivek, she said, voice cool. Did your ancestor mine the ore? Build the tools? Shape the future of that sector? Rivek blinked. He claimed it. Claiming is not creating. Strength is only honorable when followed by labor. She turned to Peterson. And your laws, what are they without the strength to enforce them? Both young men froze. Zara stepped forward, her tone final. Neither of you are right. Or wrong. But neither of you are whole. That territory belongs to those who build its future. Together. You will rewrite this proposal. You will share that sector. They nodded, stunned. Dismissed. That night, Julian and Zara sat on the balcony again, tangled in a woven couch, the canopy rustling above. You were hard on them, Julian murmured. They'll crack under pressure if not tempered, she said. You were confused when I was soft with you. Yes, she admitted. But I was wrong. She fell silent, then added. I still see Vorik in my dreams. So do I. I hated this body once, she whispered. What it was designed for. What it almost did. Julian placed a hand on her stomach. I was never afraid of it, he said softly. Only in awe. Of it. Of you. She took his hand, holding it tight. The healers confirmed it this morning, she said. His heart stuttered. I'm with child. Time stopped. Julian stared at her, eyes wide. A life. Their child. Not a weapon. Not a tactic. A future. He pulled her into his arms, holding her like a lifeline. She didn't resist. In a world born from war, they had found peace. And now, they had created life. Julian sat motionless, arms around Zara as the reality settled like sunrise over his mind. A child. Their child. His heart thundered in his chest. Not out of fear, but awe. In the vast machinery of diplomacy and disaster, he'd never imagined this. Life. Not negotiated, not engineered, not enforced, just created. Zara was watching him with something more vulnerable than he'd ever seen. Her entire body was tense, though not with fear. With hope. Terrifying, fragile hope. Say something, she whispered. He couldn't. Not with words. Instead, he leaned forward and pressed his forehead against hers, the same gesture she once used to express absolute trust. His arms tightened around her and he held on like she was the only real thing left in the galaxy. Tears came freely. Hers. His. No shame. No posturing. Just truth. I never imagined, he began, voice breaking. That anything good could come from what they did to you. To us. Zara pulled back just enough to meet his eyes. They designed me to be a death sentence. But you, we, rewrote the code. The next few weeks passed in a blur of quiet mornings and endless preparations. Zara's instincts, once tuned for battle and politics, now reoriented around something both more terrifying and more miraculous: motherhood. The Kithar had little cultural language for it, especially for one like her, bred in a crush facility. The concept of bearing a child not for war, but for family, was so foreign it made her dizzy. But she was learning. Slowly. Julian did everything he could to make that easier. He read every cross-species prenatal medical report the Alliance database offered. He brought her nutrient infusions tailored to her hybrid metabolism. He even retrofitted their training mat with kinetic cushions and a real-time biomonitor to ensure she could still spar safely. Not that Zara had slowed down much. "You're still throwing diplomats," he said one morning, rubbing his shoulder after she'd flipped him for the third time. "I'm being gentle," she growled. "That was gentle." "You landed on a cushion," she sniffed. "In the crush, we were taught to land on teeth." Julian laughed. Loudly. Freely. They were building something. A life. Not just for their child, but for themselves. Still, there were shadows. Nothing that transformative came without consequence. One evening, as stars blinked to life beyond the canopy, Julian found Zara standing alone at the edge of their balcony. The wind stirred her hair. Her hand rested on the subtle swell of her belly. He approached quietly. "What's wrong?" "I dream of the crush," she said without turning. "Of waking in the darkness with the sound of others being selected. Taken. Upgraded. Decommissioned." She looked down. "I used to hope I'd be chosen. That I would matter. That I'd be useful." Julian stepped closer. "And now?" She turned at last, her eyes shimmering green under the stars. "Now I hope to be forgotten by them. So our child will never know what that place was." He placed a hand over hers. "Over their child. They'll never know war," he said. "Not if we keep building this." The first ripple of trouble came as a whisper. A rogue clan of Kithar, fragments from Vorek's shattered political network, had rejected the new peace. They viewed Zara's transformation not as triumph, but betrayal. One of them, a warlord named Drath, had called for a restoration of Kithar purity. His message wasn't subtle. They used her as a weapon, he declared in a pirated broadcast. Now the weapon pretends to be a queen. But it was forged for war. It must return to the forge. Zara watched the footage in silence. Julian studied her face. "We can move. The colony world on Orleans is more secure. He can't touch us there." But she shook her head. "No more running. If I'm to be a mother, I must be more than a myth. I must be seen." So they stayed. And they prepared. The Alliance High Command took the threat seriously. Security tripled. Zara's movements were shadowed by discreet drones. A stealth corvette was stationed in orbit, its presence unmarked, but unmistakable to those who needed to know. And still, she trained. Each day, she practiced with Julian in slow, fluid drills, not just for strength, but control. Not because she expected to fight, but because if she ever had to, it would not be for a treaty. It would be for her family. "I will never again be someone's weapon," she said one night, as she cleaned her claws with quiet, meditative focus. Julian nodded. "You never were. They just lied loud enough to make you believe it." She smiled, softly. "Sadly. I don't believe it anymore." When the attack finally came, it was fast. Not a fleet. Not a storm of plasma. A single infiltration pod. Silent. Unannounced. It hit their upper canopy in the dark of night, embedding itself in the tree's trunk like a parasite. 2 assassins emerged, Kithar pure breeds, their bodies enhanced for silence and speed. Julian was already moving. So was Zara. By the time the intruders reached their bedroom, the room was empty. A hidden panel opened behind the wall. A trap, designed months ago. The first attacker stepped through it. And into Zara's strike. No rage. Just clarity. Her claws opened his throat before he could scream. The second moved for Julian, but the diplomat had learned much. He ducked low, redirecting the attack with a force pulse baton. The Kithar stumbled. Zara finished it. Afterward, as security flooded the residence, as medics checked their vitals and confirmed the fetus was unharmed, Julian and Zara sat together in silence. Alive. Together. What now? He asked. Zara looked at the two bodies. They thought I was still the same. Julian nodded. They underestimated you. No, she said. They misunderstood me. They thought I'd been softened. But love didn't weaken me. She placed his hand back over her stomach. It made me sharper. 6 months later, the jungle moon of Zyros shimmered with silver light as two suns dipped below the horizon. It was warm. Still. A kind of sacred quiet that fell only in moments where everything aligned: weather, peace, time. Inside the polished wooden walls of the habitation dome, a soft chime echoed. Julian turned from the stove, wiping his hands on a towel. The scent of grilled root vegetables and fermented grain stew still clung to the air. Zara stood in the archway, silhouetted against the balcony's dusk glow. Her belly was round now, her stride slower, heavier, but no less graceful. The stripes along her skin glowed faintly under the bioluminescent lights, and a lazy purr vibrated in her chest. They've arrived, she said. He smiled. On time. I'm impressed. Zara only grunted. They better be. Their guests, Peterson and Rivek, now no longer cadets but full diplomatic attaches, stood nervously at the threshold. Their expressions were older, more lined, seasoned by bureaucracy and too many galactic conferences. Still, around Zara, they reverted slightly into wide-eyed pupils. Ambassador, Rivek said, bowing slightly. Anne. Matriarch. Zara blinked, amused. I am not a matriarch. You kind of are, Peterson muttered. Symbolically. Julian stepped in. Dinner's ready. They gathered around the low curved table, seated on cushions. The air was filled with conversation, soft clinking of glasses, and occasional laughter, especially from Zara, who had developed a very particular weakness for Terran citrus wine. Eventually, the topic turned, inevitably, to the upcoming trade summit. Rivek was first to voice concern. The Crave delegates are refusing to accept the Kithar proposal. Again. They claim your people's previous claim over Sector J-77 makes any shared initiative a non-starter. Zara rolled her eyes. The Crave can't even digest protein without assistance, but they talk like emperors. They have 6 ships in the sector, Peterson added. And now, a veto proposal. They've drawn their line. Julian sipped his drink slowly. Then we draw a better one. Zara's gaze sharpened. No threats. No. But something new. He turned to Rivek. Who taught you that power always wins? The young Kithar shifted uncomfortably. The crush. Julian nodded. It's time you unlearn it. The rest of the night was spent outlining a counterproposal that balanced tradition, legality, and strategic flattery so well that it practically weaponized diplomacy. It was Zara who finalized the phrasing. Don't demand power, she said. Invite respect. Then defend it. Rivek bowed low, a gesture of newfound understanding. You continue to teach us. After they'd left, and the dishes were cleared, Zara stood at the edge of the balcony again, her arms around herself, watching the starlight flicker on the canopy. Julian joined her. You're quiet, he said. She nodded. I was remembering the first time I stood like this. Same view. But I was different. I know, he whispered. I hated this body, she said softly. Everything it represented. Even after the betrayal. Especially after the truth. I couldn't look at myself and not see their design. Julian wrapped an arm around her shoulders. She leaned into him. But now, she added, turning his hand and placing it gently on her stomach, I know something else. I wasn't born of love. But I'm carrying it now. He felt a kick. Small. Defiant. Alive. Emotion gripped his throat. He kissed her temple. She whispered, do you think they'll ever truly understand what we've done? Julian smiled. Maybe not. But they'll feel it. They stood in silence for a long time. Until Zara's ears twitched. A sound. Soft. Measured. The door opened. A small figure padded in. Fur the color of autumn bark. Eyes a perfect blend of emerald and iron gray. A child. Their daughter. She toddled to them, clutching a stuffed Terran animal in one hand and one of Zara's claw gloves in the other. Zara scooped her up with practiced ease. The little one purred instinctively against her mother's shoulder. Julian watched them, his family. A warrior. A diplomat. A child born of defiance, of principle, of love. This, he thought, is how peace truly begins. Not with treaties or speeches. But with the transformation of weapons into people, and people into parents. The universe would write its legends. But the real miracle had already happened here. Quietly. Together. That was the story of Julian and Zara, a diplomat and a living weapon, brought together by politics and held together by principle. What began as an impossible situation, a trap veiled in diplomacy, became one of the most astonishing peace legends in Alliance history. But more than that, it was a human story. A story of boundaries respected, of purpose questioned, of identity reclaimed. It showed that empathy, the refusal to dominate, and the belief in another's right to choose are not weaknesses, but the sharpest weapons of all. Zara was never just a bioengineered warrior. She was more than the sum of her programming, more than the role the Dominion forced upon her. And Julian, calm, composed Julian, proved that strength could come not from fists or fire, but from restraint. From listening. From patience. Together, they shattered not just a plot, but an entire worldview, one that said power is everything. They built something new in its place, a future. A family. And in the end, perhaps the greatest HFY message of all was this. Humanity's superpower isn't its machines. It isn't its guns. It's that deep, illogical, irrepressible capacity to see personhood, even in those designed to destroy them. And to choose love anyway. If this story moved you, if it made you think, or even if you just love alien warrior romances with political intrigue and high-stakes peace talks, don't forget to like the video, subscribe for more stories like this, and share it with someone who needs a little faith in the power of connection. Until next time, stay curious, stay human.